R. Kelly was once known as an R&B singer who was loved by many and music made people feel good. That was until the dark truth about the way he really lived for over 2 decades slowly came to light, until it could no longer be ignored. The once Grammy award-winning musician and record producer was sentenced to 30 years behind bars after being found guilty of sex trafficking and racketeering. For some, this came as a surprise or even hard to believe, but in reality these accusations have been going on since the start of his career in the early 90s.
Here are R. Kelly and MGM.
In 1989, R. Kelly would gain national recognition when he and his group MGM performed on the talent show Big Break, winning the competition and leaving with $100,000.
Hey, to the order of Robert Kelly and MGM, $100,000!
The group would disband shortly after, but R. Kelly would go on to sign his first record deal in 1991. Although this was just the beginning of his lengthy and promising career, court documents now show this was also around the time he began interacting with underage females. Tiffany Hawkins was the first victim to speak up and come forward about a relationship with R. Kelly. She began sleeping with him in 1991 when she was only 15 years old and he was 24. After spotting his car in the parking lot, she ran over to meet the star, to where he gave her his home address and told her to come over and bring friends. While she found the age gap weird, she explained this was a superstar, so for me I thought maybe this was different. Maybe this is just how it was.
Do you like teenage girls? When you say teenage, how old are we talking?
With the end of his relationship with Tiffany in 1994, he had already started seeing someone new and even more controversial. To this day, the details of R. Kelly and singer Aaliyah's relationship still has unanswered questions. But what we do know is the two met when she was just 12 years old in a studio and an aspiring R&B artist. Over the years, the two would become very close. Initially, it appeared as if he was acting as a mentor to her in her upcoming career. Critics would even go on to state her music sounded like R. Kelly, but with a little girl singing. Was this just his influence, or early signs of his controlling behavior? R. Kelly seemed to have been intent on presenting Aaliyah to the world as a miniature version of himself. He even insisted Aaliyah be dressed like him in her videos, and soon after, everywhere they went, which was becoming more frequent. This obviously started to raise suspicions in the public eye, and people began asking questions.
Everybody seems to think that y'all are either girlfriend or boyfriend, or cousins, or let's just get the record straight.
Well, no, we're not related at all. No, we're not. We're just very close. He's my best friend.
Eventually, the question went from are the two in a secret relationship to are Aaliyah and R. Kelly secretly married? For some time, both went on to deny the rumor repeatedly until it finally became a fact. In 1994, Vibe magazine published a certificate showing proof that the two were in fact in a relationship and married. The problem was, he was 27 and she was just 15 years old at the time.
Love man hip-hop star R. Kelly did indeed marry his protege, the 15-year-old singer Aaliyah Houghton.
A former tour manager for R. Kelly later testified at his trial that he did bribe a government worker to obtain a fake ID so the singers could marry. Needless to say, just a month later the marriage was annulled and the two would eventually go their separate ways. But this was all just the tip of the iceberg. As I mentioned before, Tiffany Hawkins, who was his first known victim, would come forward sometime in 1996. She sued R. Kelly for $10 million for personal injuries and severe emotional harm. But the lawsuit was settled for a fraction of the amount she was asking, just $250,000. R. Kelly appeared to be off the hook, continuing his career releasing successful songs, even winning major awards, but the accusations would only continue.
Y'all need to leave him alone. That's not R. Kelly.
2001, a former intern at Epic Records said she was seduced and treated as his personal object until he cast her aside, even going as far to say he controlled every aspect of her life, including who she would see and where she went. The case was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. 2002, 2 more cases emerged. Montina Woods sues, alleging that R. Kelly videotaped them together without her knowledge. The recording was then sold by bootleggers under the title R. Kelly XXX. Then, another woman, Patrice Jones, claimed he impregnated her while she was underage and then was forced to get an abortion. But once again, both cases were settled out of court, where he paid undisclosed amounts in return for non-disclosure agreements. By doing so, he was protected from any further allegations by them, and this only made him feel more untouchable. It was apparent by now that he was using his status to lure these young women in. Most of the victims shared a common interest as aspiring singers or something music industry related that he made promises to help them achieve, while secretly fulfilling his own twisted fantasy. Not even a few months later, the Chicago Sun-Times received an anonymous video that once again appeared to show R. Kelly participating in sexual acts with a minor, including urinating on the victim. The video was passed on to the police, who verified it was in fact R. Kelly in his Chicago home. But because the video was submitted anonymously and not by the victim herself, it made things difficult. The girl that was suspected of being in the video would not cooperate with authorities, and neither would her parents. It took 6 years for the case to even go to trial, during which he released his wildly successful Trapped in the Closet album that got nominated for awards despite what was going on. The jury eventually concluded they couldn't prove the girl in the tape was a minor without her cooperation. Therefore, he was found not guilty on all counts.
He did not expect that it would take 6.5 years. This has been a terrible ordeal for him and his family. And at this point, all he wants to do is move forward and try to put it behind him.
At this point, people became outraged. This was no longer one person making these accusations, and although he had been considered innocent until this point, it was getting hard for anyone to defend him. As victims came forth about their experiences, it only encouraged more women to speak up as well. It would take almost 10 years before they gathered enough people and evidence to come after the superstar once again.
Y'all trying to kill me! You're killing me, man!
In 2017, BuzzFeed wrote a detailed report claiming R. Kelly had trapped 6 women in what they called a sex cult. The article alleged that he seduced young women when they approached him for help with their careers and music, and then he would take control of their lives, confiscating their cell phones and making them cut contact with friends and relatives. He would then dictate what they ate, how they dressed, how they bathed, and even how they engaged in sexual encounters that he would then record. These allegations came from 3 of his former employees as well as the parents of the girls, who said their kids basically vanished. This would all lead up to the 2019 documentary titled Surviving R. Kelly. 6 episodes that were 1 hour each would air on Lifetime TV. Interviews and stories from dozens of women and the parents of victims spoke out. 2 weeks after the program went live, he was dropped from his record label, and most of his upcoming concerts were canceled. Shortly after, a lawyer obtained a video showing R. Kelly sleeping with a 14-year-old girl, and once again they had something solid they could come after him for. He was arrested and charged in his home city of Chicago for prostitution, sex trafficking, and aggravated sexual abuse. It took 2 years for this to go to trial, to which he was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 30 years behind bars. A bittersweet moment was also captured during the trial when the judge asked R. Kelly's lawyers an impactful question. Do they deny that R. Kelly had sexual relations with the late singer Aaliyah while she was underage? According to those present, his lawyers let out a deep sigh and responded, no, they do not deny it. Confirming a question that had been unanswered for almost 30 years and bringing justice not only to Aaliyah, but all the women and lives that were impacted by his wrongdoings.